What's going on, guys? It's Kyle with Velocity Film Labs, and today we're going to be talking about a camera that's very near and dear to my heart. This is a camera I pretty much use every day and have been for the past 2.5 years. This is a camera I consider to be the best 35mm rangefinder you can get. The camera that I'm talking about is this camera. It is the Minolta CLE. I don't know if you guys have heard of this camera. I mean, it's not like an uncommon camera nowadays. I know there's a few videos out there, but this is a camera that when I first got into 35mm rangefinders, I had never heard of. I obviously knew about the Leicas. I knew about the Contacts, G1 and G2. Those aren't true rangefinders, but you know, the rangefinder styles. So once I heard about this camera, I knew I had to learn a little bit more about it, and I'm now making this video to give you guys a little insight on it, because when I first tried to look for it, there's like nothing out there on it. Also, this video is not going to be a review on the technical specs of this camera. I'm by no means a technical person. When I like a camera, it's more so because of the feeling of it and just the general shooting experience of the camera. So that's pretty much all I'm going to be talking about, is my personal thoughts and feelings on shooting with this camera compared to other rangefinders I've shot with. I'm going to try and break down this review into pros and cons, but also just, as I said earlier, my personal thoughts and like the vibes of the camera when I shoot with it, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. But yeah, again, nothing technical. So to start out, we can go over some of the pros of this camera. This camera, first of all, is super portable and lightweight. I don't know if you guys have ever held a Leica. Leicas are built fantastically, but they are substantially bigger than this. A lot of people don't mind that though, and a lot of people prefer the heft of the Leica. By no means is this camera like built cheaply. It is very well built, has a good substantial weight to it, but the size of it is pretty nice. I mean, it is pretty much like the size of the palm of my hand. So that allows me to go ahead and put it inside of some sort of like crossbody bag without any issues, which is super nice. Another pro of this camera is that the viewfinder does not get super crowded with multiple frame lines. So this camera natively supports a 28mm, 40mm, and 90mm lens. So when you look through the viewfinder, there's a 28mm frame lines, which are obviously the widest. That is pretty much just the whole viewfinder. So you don't even really see those frame lines. The only frame lines you really see in there are the 40mm frame lines, which is what I shoot on. The 40mm is pretty much the native lens for this. I would say the 40mm is what this camera shoots and feels with the best. It's also the smallest lens. I don't know if you can see that, but it is literally like maybe an inch tall, which really makes this camera super portable also, to the last statement that I made. But the viewfinder is super bright and super clear, and it's in the perfect spot right on the top left corner of the camera, which is where it should be on a rangefinder. That way you can keep both eyes open when you shoot. But anyways, it's super bright and clear rangefinder, super nice rangefinder patch. I know you can get away with having viewfinders with only 1 or 2 sets of frame lines if you get like the Leica M3 or like, you know, the M2 or one of the older Leicas, but it is nice that it comes with this camera when you get it. Honestly, the biggest pro of this camera and the main reason I bought it was the simple fact that it has aperture priority mode. If you don't know what aperture priority mode is literally when you set the aperture on your camera, and the camera will go ahead, take a reading of the light, and pick the correct shutter speed to properly expose the image for you. So, in essence, when I'm shooting street and I don't want to mess with my, exposure settings, I'll go ahead and just set the aperture of the camera to f8 or f11, depending on what time of day it is, and the camera will pretty much just pick the shutter speed for me, which is super nice, because when I'm, zone focusing or taking quick shots, in essence, it's a point and shoot, because at f8, almost everything past 10 feet to infinity is in focus, especially if you're using like a 28 or 40mm lens, that it pretty much it's just a point and shoot. And I know Aperture priority is not that important. Having a meter is really nice because you can at least know what your exposure settings should be. But trust me, having aperture priority makes your life so much easier. Not having to take meter readings with your phone or with another meter and just being able to do it on your camera through aperture priority, meaning you don't even need to touch the shutter speeds, makes shooting from daytime to nighttime super easy, and just in general makes the shooting experience a lot easier for me. All I have to worry about is composition. I don't have to worry about exposure. I don't have to worry about messing with my settings, and it just makes everything easier. So I applaud Minolta and I guess Leica for their collaboration on this by adding aperture priority. This is random, but another big pro of this camera I like is that this camera is able to do TTL flash through aperture priority, which is really nice. So how this works is, let me pull this flash out. There is this little native flash, I don't know if you see that, this little native flash that you can go ahead and just slide right on your camera like that. And super nice, super portable. But when you turn this bad boy on, anytime you're in aperture priority and your shutter speed is below a 60th, so even like a 50th, 40th, whatever, slower than a 60th of a second, it will automatically trigger this flash. So I know a lot of people will just set their cameras to f8, pick a flash setting and just flash away. If you overexpose film with flash, it's pretty savable, pretty easy to recover. But with this, it makes it super nice just because I don't have to like punch in my flash settings. If I put this on f8 and it's at nighttime and it's like a 20th of a second, it knows to automatically trigger this flash, which is super nice for me at least, because I can go from shooting in the evening where my shutter speed might be a 60th of a second, where I don't need flash, to 15 minutes later, just having this flash on, it'll automatically trigger it, even though the flash is on, it'll automatically trigger it, which is super nice, even though it's only half an hour later. I don't have to take the flash and just change all these settings or anything. It automatically will just know it's less than a 60th of a second. So that's another big thing I like about this camera compared to other more manual rangefinders. All right, another pro. This might be the final pro. I'm not sure. I think this is like the 5th pro. But generally speaking, for a rangefinder of this caliber, the price is not horrendous. And I know what you're thinking. It's still expensive. It's a very expensive camera. This camera goes for like around $1,000. But for the features you're getting, the build quality, having interchangeable lenses, if you wanted a camera that had these specs, besides this camera, there's really only a handful that shoot 35mm film. It's like the Hexar RF, the Zeiss Icon, and the Leica M7. The cheapest alternative is the Hexar RF. Another good camera, it's bigger, it's more electronic in the sense that it has an electronic shutter. This has an electronic shutter, but at least it has a manual advanced lever. The Konica Hexar does not. So say what you want. Those types of cameras to me don't always inspire me because it feels like I'm literally using a digital point and shoot that shoots film, because I'm not winding anything. There's no tactile nature to it, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, it's a little more expensive. The Zeiss Icon is a great alternative. It's about $500 to $600 more. Pretty much has the same features as this aperture priority, just bigger, probably a little better built. Takes M-mount glass. And then the M7, obviously the Leica M7 is a great camera, just the M6, but with aperture priority, it's bigger, chunkier, it's like $2,700 to $3,500, but also a great camera. All I'm saying is that if for a camera of this size and these specs, the price is not horrible. Obviously, there are cheaper cameras out there, but the cheaper cameras all have one thing in common, like the Canonets, the Olympus RCs or 35 RCs or whatever they're called. They don't have interchangeable lenses. The minute you want an interchangeable lens rangefinder, prices skyrocket. It's crazy. The Leica effect. But the Minolta CLE is easily the best, I think, option if you want aperture priority and interchangeable lens, all the specs. Another good alternative, though, if you don't care about aperture priority and you want interchangeable lenses is the Leica CL, which is very similar to this camera, except it doesn't have aperture priority. Same size, about the same weight, and they take M-mount glass as well. So it's also a good alternative. Okay, I think that was the last pro. We can start getting into the cons a bit. There aren't a whole lot of cons, but there definitely are some things that I want to mention before you think about purchasing this camera. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the pros of lightweight, small, price efficient, is that a word? Price effective, all lead to this camera being great, but also lead to it not being quite as built well as the higher end, more expensive models like a Leica. I don't know if you can tell, but on my model of the CLE, you can see my advanced levers looking a little busted. We're really just kind of missing the knob of the advanced lever, so that's broken. Also, my shutter dial is great. They're not built very well. It is just kind of a piece of plastic, and it gets super sticky because the wheel and dial is right on the advanced lever, or not the advanced lever, the shutter button. So there can be, like, sometimes I've spilt some on this and there can get some gunk in between there and doesn't fire very well. The actual lens, this is the like Rocore 40mm f2 lens, great lens, but it's definitely not built like quite as well as like the 40 Summicron or like even the 35 Voigtlander. I would say it's nice because of the size, but it's definitely not built as well. But, you know, other than that, I mean, I use this thing every day. I throw it in a bag. I think the vertical rangefinder might be it might need adjusted a little bit, but other than that, like, the meter still works great, and the build quality is still good enough to me that I feel comfortable kind of beating this thing up a little bit and knowing, you know, it is cheaper. If I break it, I can just get another one, unlike a Leica, where I wouldn't feel as comfortable doing that. But yeah, so the build quality is not the best. Could be better, but it's still good. Okay, pro number 2 is that this camera is fully electronic. It is an electronic shutter, electronic meter. I think that's about it. That's really electronic. All the components involve electricity. They take 2 little batteries. I don't know if you can see that. Yep, 2 little batteries. Super easy batteries to find. I literally have never had to change out the batteries because they last forever. There's no on and off. I guess there is an on and off switch to the camera, but I just leave it on all the time. But I've never had to change the batteries in 2 years. They last forever, which is great. But the minute an electronic component in your camera dies or goes wrong, you're screwed. You can't fix this camera. You might be able to, but there's no one out there that really knows how to fix it. They're not like Leicas, it's not mechanical, so you can't shoot this without a battery. So it's pretty much a paperweight. The lenses are great, you can keep the lenses for other cameras, but the minute this thing has an electronic deficiency, it's broken, which is unfortunate. And I'm sure at some point it will break. I mean, all electronic film cameras built in the 80s, 90s are bound to break at some point, so they are just, you know, that's the risk you take when you buy expensive electric cameras. But, you know, for what it is, it's a risk I'm willing to take because so far I haven't had any issues. And that's the only reason I'd recommend this camera. If I was having electrical issues all willy-nilly, I definitely wouldn't recommend it, but so far the reliability has been insane. So that is, I guess, a small con. But the other thing about that con is all aperture priority cameras, for the most part, are electronic cameras. Besides, I guess, the M7, you might be able to shoot mechanically at like a certain shutter speed, but the Icon, Hexar, G2, whatever, those are all electric. So, you know, they're all the same. But this one, that is a con, you know, I guess, of all of electronic cameras. Another con, and this one's kind of small, is that these cameras are becoming increasingly harder to find. Like, when I first started looking a few years ago, you know, you can still get them from Japan. You're gonna have to pay for import fees, you're gonna have to pay taxes. It's gonna end up being like an extra few $100s. To find these in the US, it is pretty tricky. There's not a whole lot that are fully functioning. You know, if you think about it, there's about a gazillion Leicas out there. There's a ton of Leicas. People are trying to sell those things because they hold value really well. These things don't hold their value nearly as well as Leicas do. So people tend to keep them if something happens to them. Where Leica's like, you know, people can sell the shell of a Leica for $1,000. Where these are much harder to find, I think, in the online marketplace. But if you can find a good deal on one, I definitely recommend considering it. Okay guys, that was kind of my final con for the Minolta CLE. Again, this is a camera that I literally love so much and has been inspiring me for so long to keep shooting. If I didn't have this camera, I probably wouldn't have a lot of the photos that I've taken. I probably would not have been able to shoot if I did not have this camera. There's a lot of times that this camera came really in handy in terms of shooting indoors and being discreet. It's almost like having a point and shoot on you, but it's a full-fledged true rangefinder. Being able to have the focusing patch and being able to have accurate focus is super important to me. That's like a big reason why I don't use point and shoots a whole lot anymore. It's just because I have this camera, which is about the size of a point and shoot, which is super nice, and having aperture priority, as I mentioned before, is super nice. So those are honestly the biggest reasons why I think this is the best 35mm rangefinder you can get, especially for the price. Even, you know, think about like the Contax T2, that's like $1,000. So I mean, you're pretty much paying for a Contax T2, but you can get a camera with interchangeable lenses, aperture priority, similar size and weight. You can get a flash as well. And like, there's a lot of other things you can get for this camera, but overall this camera has been and treated me super well. So that's about it on this camera. I'm definitely gonna make more videos coming up. All of my street POVs from this channel that I'll post and from my old channel have been done using this camera. So I'll put in photo examples and everything. If you wanna see everything, you know, go check out my other channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this channel so we can keep putting out more videos. And if you have any more video ideas, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. But yeah, I'll catch you guys on the next video.